And there we are. Adjust the camera a little bit. And welcome everyone. I'm going to kind of be flying solo a little bit tonight. Kathleen may join us in a little bit. And let me just double check our chat room. Make sure everything is working properly. Give me just a minute. Waiting for the camera to come up on our live stream and our start page. Okay, looks like we're coming through on DLive okay. We're just waiting for Twitch to catch up on the feed. There it goes. It's a little slower. All right. So, let me know in the chat room if you can see and hear me. We always do this at the beginning. We never quite know what kind of interference we might be encountering. There we are. We've got everybody on Pat Chair tonight. It looks great. Wow. Got a lot of people here this evening. Thank you, Leanne. Mr. Wilson, welcome. Thank you. I see you survived your large family Thanksgiving get-together, Mr. Wilson. Great to see you again. Thank you, everyone. Outstanding. Beautiful. You guys are raring to go. So we're already lifting off the ground on Patch Air. We will definitely be at 30,000 feet tonight. Looking at the big picture. Yep, I got my flannels on tonight, Christine. Put the camera back on here.
Can I say hi?
You can say hi. Yep, there she is. Hi.
I'm puppy sitting and they're sleeping right now. It's like a doggy daycare here.
You just gave away the surprise.
I did?
I haven't said anything to anybody. I just told them there was going to be a surprise.
I'll go out and come
so you go out and come back in later with the surprise. Because maybe nobody heard you.
I'm going to go in chat.
All right, you go in chat.
All right.
All right. Anyway, I think she just gave away the surprise. Let's see. Yeah, Jay, you were right. Okay, so yeah, the puppies are here. Puppies are here. Thanks to some good friends that were able to help us out with this, and we were able to do that. The dogs, the puppies, a male and female, are sleeping right now. They really have just been overwhelmed today, so they're having a little sleep, but they're going to be in. They're going to be in a minute. For some reason, my camera is way behind the chat room in Twitch, so I may find it a little difficult to keep up with you guys. But anyway, yeah, we'll bring the puppies in a little while. Let me see if I can. All right. So like I said, some friends of ours were kind enough to help us purchase these pups, and the breeder was fantastic with us today. She gave us the full rundown on how to do our initial training with them and all that, those good things. So I'll let them speak for themselves when they get here. Let's jump into our scripture for the evening. Get our scripture posted. Revelation 12:10, and we will go through the balance of that. And then we are going to launch into some new information that I have not presented for you. It does relate, of course, to COVID-19. And we can't really escape that topic, can we? Sorry, I'm just kind of jumping around a little bit here, trying to get to my notes for the evening. We've been scrambling all day. I barely made it here for the live stream this evening. So give me just a second to catch up. And here we are. Amazing. We're off and running here. Gosh. You know, when you don't have all the time for prep that you normally do, it shows on these live programs. All right, Revelation chapter 12. We'll jump right to verse 10. I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, and this is again very familiar scripture, but it takes on a new meaning within the modern day context. Now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, he who accuses them day and night before God. They have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And they did not love their lives so as to shy away from death. Therefore rejoice, O heavens, and you who dwell in them. But woe to the earth and the sea. With great fury the devil has come down to you, knowing he has only a short time. And we have referenced that scripture several times, especially the last line there where we've repeatedly reminded all of us, ourselves included, that the devil has and knows he has only a short time. And that's why when we get into this discussion about the acceleration, as I call it, the parabolic acceleration of technology, it is because Satan knows that he has but a short time. Thrown down to the earth, he tries his best to employ his tools, his technologies built out through his minions under the influence of his satanic, demonic entities that he sends forth. And just sort of parenthetically, I'd like just to remind you that it is my position, it is my stated position, that with the advent of quantum computing, such as we find with D-Wave systems, IBM, Google, Rigetti, and many others, these are in the statements of the founders of D-Wave, in those that are operating with quantum computing, that they are accessing parallel dimensions. Now with their latest model accessing over 5,000 parallel dimensions, in fact, 2 to the 5,000th power, according to their own statements, their own mathematical projections. Parallel dimensions, which I consider to be doorways to demonic entities to thereby enter into our realm. These parallel dimensions now number in 2 to the 5,000th power in quantity. Essentially, we're looking at, for our purposes, an infinite number of parallel dimensions. Therefore, we see not only the fruits of their labors of these demonic entities who possess those that are pushing these technologies that open these dimensional doorways to parallel dimensions, utilizing forbidden knowledge, forbidden technology. This is all evidence, the acceleration of technology, as to the parabolic increase of the infiltration of demonic entities into our world, into our dimension, if you like. And so when we see the evidence of this, not only in the technologies, but in the proclamations, the prognostications of these that are, whom we consider to be possessed, not by the Holy Spirit, but possessed by demonic spirits, we see the fruits of their labors. And their fruits are strictly malevolent. And I think no more obvious example is this grand delusion that God has given them over to, that a virus, which really is nothing more than a common flu-like virus within the family of viruses known as coronaviruses, occupied by MERS and SARS and COVID-19 and many others. What I'd like to share with you tonight are enhancements to that simple flu-like virus. Enhancements that I have not shared. I've hinted at these before, but I'm going to share with you new information that the Lord shared with me just on Thursday. It didn't come to me by way of patrons, although much of what I share with you, I share because it has been shared with me by patrons who are doing their own independent thinking, their own critical thinking, their own researching. They're operating as good Bereans, and they send Kathleen and myself a wealth of information that we share with you. I can't share it all. The quantity is really overwhelming, but that's not to say that it's not welcome. So please continue to send the information. And tonight, I'm going to set aside time for questions because I know there are a lot of questions by way of email that I don't have time to personally respond to, but I will try to do verbally through the live stream tonight. And also answering questions by way of our monthly Entangled magazine. It will be published on the 1st of December. What I'm going to share with you tonight is going to be fully fleshed out in the research papers, in the reference evidence in the December issue of Entangled magazine, which I've completed writing before we became overwhelmed by puppies today. I finished the magazine a couple of days ago. This information that I'm going to share will not only answer a great deal of the questions we've received, but I think it will not only be surprising, but I think it will be sobering. Now, I shared with you Revelation 12:10 for a reason, because our topic for tonight is overcome. We do not operate, you and I, we do not operate in a spirit of fear. We operate in a spirit of having been saved through the grace of God, but also the defeat of death through Jesus Christ, the shedding of his blood. He has conquered by the blood of the Lamb. We have conquered through the grace of God. We have conquered Satan by the blood of the Lamb. Verse 11, they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony. And it is for us to go forward with that word, to go forward with our testimony, to not only be a good Berean and to be well studied in the word, but to go forward with our testimony of the salvation. We've said this many times in the past, and perhaps recently we've not repeated it enough. But it's the good news of salvation, which is the literal bottom line here with everything that we are doing. We can talk about the technology, the biology, the DNA, the messenger RNA, the vaccines. We can talk about all that stuff and reveal that. It's necessary to reveal the workings of Satan, so that we can warn people about these workings, about this grand delusion, to shed a bright light on this grand delusion. God's given the world over to that delusion because they have been steadfast in seeking sin and continuing in their sin. They're missing out on the good news. But many have purposefully turned their heads, turned their face, their gaze, their attention away from Jesus Christ and God our Creator, who created our DNA, the designer of our DNA, because they would rather rejoice in sin rather than rejoicing in the eternal salvation of their soul, which is offered by God through the sacrifice the shedding of the blood of his Son. But Satan is the accuser who has been going to and fro, who's been standing before the throne of God and has been accusing us, but no more. The closer Jesus Christ in physical form comes to returning to this earth as a roaring lamb and with the sword of truth in his hand, and by his breath, his simple speaking, he will defeat death once and for all. He will cast evil into the lake of fire. And those that are not saved, likewise, will be cast into the lake of fire. So time is short. We know that. The more that we see the proliferation of these technologies, specifically this assault on God's creation, our DNA, which manifests ultimately in terms of the vaccine. And this is where I will be addressing some questions tonight, specific to the vaccine. Not to the virus itself, but to the vaccine as the mark of the beast. Okay? So you can see where I'm going with my answers to questions and my clarifications and reiterations. We're going to differentiate between the flu, the virus itself, COVID-19, and the mark of the beast in the form of the vaccine. We've explained in depth the vaccine itself in terms of its mechanism of delivery by way of initially a hypodermic needle in the syringe, but eventually by the microneedle array patch. But that's an entirely different scenario than those who have already contracted COVID-19 and those that also who have contracted, and we will again repeat this and reinforce it, those who have contracted HIV and HIV/AIDS. Those are not the mark of the beast. Okay? There's a clear line between those two. And again, we will differentiate that and we will explain that. Okay? Alrighty. Let me just check the DLive live stream. Just want to make sure everything's working properly before I move on here. I have a lot of screens open, so please, as always, bear with me and allow me some opportunity here. You guys are always patient with me when I have to jump around on these screens so much. And I thank you for that. Okay. So the news that I have to share with you is not necessarily what I just said, that the line in the sand between COVID-19 / HIV/AIDS that's incorporated into that, we'll talk about that. That's not the big news, that there's a difference between the virus and the vaccine when we're talking about specifically the mark of the beast. You already know that there's a clear distinction between what is considered the mark of the beast, which is the vaccine, and the virus itself, okay? So just to clarify that, but that's not the new information that I have to present tonight. Alrighty? Let me leave this camera on the screen here. I want to jump over to Patreon messaging. Those of you that are patrons, you receive quite a bit of information by way of our messaging system, so I encourage everyone to join us on Patreon if and when you're able to, because there's a lot more information, reference material, evidence, links to peer-reviewed research that really helps to flesh out the case that we present in these live streams about COVID-19. And I want to remind you that not everything that I post in Patreon messaging necessarily gets transferred into Entangled Magazine. Entangled Magazine, published on the first of every month, now for 4 years. What I do is take a very narrow focus of information, presenting very specific evidence to one specific line of reasoning. So a lot of the extra information that's presented during the month resides within the Patreon messaging, and that does not usually make its way into Entangled Magazine. So you have 3 sources of information. You have the live streams 3 times a week. You have Patreon messaging, where nearly every single day you're getting messages from me, articles primarily. And third, you have Entangled itself. So there's quite a bit of information that we offer to you for your own independent study. And then number 4, on top of that, are all the things that the patrons send to us, that many of those do get posted. Articles that are sent to me by email are posted into Patreon. It's messages for the other patrons. But it also, that information coming in from patrons by way of emails serves to improve our greater understanding of what is going on. You know, we talk about flying on Patch Airlines at 30,000 feet. And the purpose of that is so that we try to maintain a big picture perspective on world events and what's going on. Even though we drill down deep into the technology, we try to maintain a big picture perspective, a multi, if you will, a polymath perspective on all of the topics of the day. And really the only way I'm able to keep up with that polymath sort of multidisciplinary big picture perspective is because you all share that information with Kathleen and myself, and we don't have time to reach out to all of those sources. So in a shorthand fashion, you're sending us information that keeps us in the loop of the big picture on a multiple number of topics and agendas and lines of reasoning. So thank you very much for that. I want to go Patreon messaging, and I reposted just before we went live, just a few moments before, an article that we covered in a video, in a live stream. And thank you, Dr. Darnell, who notified me before the live stream. She noticed on my YouTube channel that the video entitled Invalid Use of PCR Testing, that's the polymerase chain reaction testing that is being used for testing of individuals positive or negative for COVID-19. And we posted that video citing this article that I'm about to review very quickly with you. Valid information, but YouTube already, I have 1 copyright strike that just occurred a few days ago that I shared with the patrons because of a video entitled COVID Viper. And we were discussing back on the 13th of October that it appears that in the development of the vaccine for COVID-19, they are lifting research out of the research regarding the venom of pit vipers. I received a copyright strike, my first one, from YouTube, and they pulled that video, COVID Viper, from the 13th of October. Now, apparently, they have pulled a second video from me, Invalid Use of PCR Testing. And thank you again, Dr. Darnell, for alerting me to that. Apparently, that just happened today. But the article that was referenced is entitled Questioning the HIV/AIDS Hypothesis, 30 Years of Dissent. This is published in the U.S. National Library of Medicine, National Institutes of Health, the NIH. We presented this white paper, completely peer-reviewed, completely acknowledged in the medical community, Okay? And yet YouTube censored us for publishing something that is public information. In fact, the title of this section in the NIH archives is entitled Frontiers in Public Health. That's where this paper appears. And yet, this has been censored by YouTube. This paper also was retracted. And yet it's still in the NIH archives. It's still public information. It was published in 2014, September 23rd, 2014, authored by Patricia Goodson, a bona fide researcher, an already peer-reviewed paper, but then it was retracted under force. Much like the paper that we've shared with you from January of this year from the Indian and Stanford researchers regarding the 4 inserts of short genomic sequences of HIV found in the RNA genomic sequence of COVID-19. That too was retracted. There's an obvious pattern here. I don't have to point that out. You guys already see it. Let me read just a little bit of this paper. Those of you that are patrons, you now have this paper reposted in the Patreon messaging. Since 1984, when the hypothesis that HIV caused AIDS was announced, many scholars have questioned the premise and offered alternative explanations. 30 years later, competing propositions as well as questioning of the mainstream hypothesis persists, often supported by prominent scientists. Now, let me parenthetically just interject here. Supported by prominent scientists. Same thing with the HIV inserts. Supported since January by prominent scientists that the HIV inserts indeed were found and are continue to be found in COVID-19. And yet the papers keep getting pulled. Well, fortunately, prominent scientists who are speaking against the mainstream narrative, which is what YouTube puts out and censors anything opposite the mainstream narrative, I'm sharing with you right now tonight and then fully fleshing out the evidence on the 1st of December in the pages of Entangled magazine. The papers of prominent scientists who are contrary to the mainstream narrative regarding COVID-19 specifically, but again addressing HIV inserts. So that's a lead-in to the surprise that I have for you tonight. Let's continue. This article synthesizes the most salient questions raised alongside theories proposing non-viral causes for AIDS. The synthesis is organized according to 4 categories of data believed to support the HIV/AIDS hypothesis. Retroviral molecular markers. Let me stop right there. Retroviral, that's HIV. It's a retrovirus. By definition, a retrovirus enters the nucleus of the cell and binds to the host cell DNA, and thus binding to it permanently alters the host DNA. That is another point that must be kept in the forefront of your testimony about the vaccine itself, comprising the mark of the beast. I want to underscore HIV and COVID-19 is not the mark of the beast. There's a clear distinction between virus and vaccine. The vaccine is the mark of the beast. A retroviral molecular marker. Transmission electron microscopy images of retroviral particles. Number 3, efficacy of antiretroviral drugs. And number 4, epidemiological data. Okay, those are the 4 categories of data that is believed to support the HIV/AIDS hypothesis. Despite 3 decades of concerted investments in the mainstream hypothesis, the lingering questions and challenges synthesized herein offer public health professionals an opportunity to reflect on their assumptions. I'll underscore assumptions here. And practices regarding HIV/AIDS. Now, the inventor of polymerase chain reaction testing, which is applied to COVID-19, PCR testing, the inventor is Kary Mullis, Kary, Kary Mullis. Quote from Kary Mullis: "The HIV/AIDS hypothesis is one hell of a mistake," wrote Kary Mullis in 1996. Mullis, a Nobel laureate in chemistry, 1993, and other distinguished scientists have claimed the HIV causes AIDS hypothesis as false, unproductive, and unethical. They have done so since 1984 when the hypothesis was proposed. 30 years after countless studies, resources, and attempts to cure have been poured into HIV/AIDS hypothesis, it may be fruitful to ask, what happened to those views and voices that once disagreed? Have the past 3 decades and their scientific, technological, and public health developments been sufficient to convince critics of the hypothesis' value? Have these advances been able to silence the questioning? Okay, so I offer this to you in the context of the discussion regarding COVID-19. 30 years regarding the mainstream narrative that HIV is the cause of AIDS is what Kary Mullis and many others have been challenging for 30 years. 30 years of time, effort, research, careers, and millions of dollars. There's still not a cure for HIV. There's still not a cure for AIDS. It begs the question, what's going on here? Why? Why have alternative viewpoints by prominent scientists been censored? This portends the narrative of today, the techniques of today, the censorship of today, and the direction of today that society is being dragged into, that society is being duped into, that society has been given over to a grand delusion. Does this bode well for prominent scientists who are speaking out against the narrative put forth about COVID-19? No, it does not bode well for those scientists. If what has happened in alternative methodologies in search of a cure for HIV and a cure for AIDS, if those alternatives have been squashed, suppressed, censored, then the alternatives that have been put forth to treat COVID-19 likewise have been squashed, have been silenced, have been censored. Because the pattern is endemic in the mainstream, it's endemic with those in a position of power, it's endemic in the scientific community. You are either in science, if you don't toe the line, then you do not advance in your career. You do not have grant monies awarded to you. You have to walk a very tightrope in the scientific community in terms of what you think, what you say, and what you want to research. That's exactly what's going on with the research into the vaccines for COVID-19. The same pattern that's been there for 30 years regarding HIV and AIDS that same pattern is now so entrenched that now today with COVID-19, there's no way to break that pattern. There's no way for prominent scientists who have built up their career, who are now putting that career on the line. Up to this point, they may have been walking that tightrope, building their career. But now, specific to COVID-19, they're diverting, putting their careers on the line. Certainly, we have scientists that are speaking out that are already retired. So they've broken free of the mainstream, broken free of the scientific community, and have been speaking out and publishing. And I share some of those researchers with you tonight and in the pages of COVID-19. In the pages of Entangled Magazine regarding COVID-19 and those that are stepping out and speaking out. Okay? I wanted to share that with you because not only are you seeing an example of how entrenched the mainstream narrative is, medical community, research community, academia, politics, economics, all entrenched in a mainstream narrative regarding HIV and AIDS, and now that is applied to COVID-19. And this is why you see people like me being censored on YouTube, because we're speaking out against the narrative. Okay? Someone in the Twitch chat room is saying that they worked in a blood components lab and said that what I said is very true. No walking the line, no grant money. We have research scientists that communicate with us. They tell us this. I don't need to make it up. And many of you that are listeners to these live streams are in the scientific community. And if you were able to, I'm sure you would echo everything that I just said. Okay? Now, remember, I'm going to allow time tonight for questions, so it may in fact be an entire hour set aside for questions if you want to, but I will try to head some of those questions off by going ahead and answering some that I have received by email. Okay? Alrighty. Kary Mullis, whom I said was the inventor of PCR testing, also said prior to COVID-19 really getting underway, but PCR testing in the early months was applied. PCR testing was applied to COVID. Kary Mullis came out and said, it doesn't apply. It doesn't test for a virus. It tests for the genetic sequence of a virus, but it doesn't test for antibodies. Okay? PCR testing is completely invalid in the application towards COVID-19. And beyond that, I just want to mention, in PCR testing, they run cycles of a sample. Generally, the acknowledged standard for PCR testing, whether it's COVID or otherwise, is to run around 30 to 35 cycles of an RNA sample. Okay, it tests for the RNA. It tests for the genetic material contained in RNA, single-stranded genomic sequence. What they're doing in COVID, they're going beyond 30 or 35 cycles to 40 and 45 cycles. At which point, Kary Mullis said, the results are completely invalid. Okay? Even if you're just looking at RNA, once you go beyond that RNA sequence, in 40 to 45 cycles of the small RNA sequence, see, it's an amplifier. It's taking a small sample and reproducing it. And when you get to 40 and 45 cycles of reproduction, your sample results are no longer valid. Okay? All right. Let's move on. Again, within our Patreon messaging, I just want to pull up a couple of things that I didn't touch on in the last live stream. Sometimes I run out of time and I don't get to all of the topics that I wanted to cover in a given live stream. United Airlines, this is November 28th, today's the 29th. United Airlines begins first chartered flights to move Pfizer's COVID vaccine as the FAA approves the plan to fly it in dry ice at minus 70 degrees, and the U.S. prepares for a mass inoculation program. This is coming from the Daily Mail in the UK, that particular article. I'm not going to read from it, I just wanted to point it out to you. If you haven't read that, what this indicates is, okay, they're talking about beginning chartered flights. Well, the obvious conclusion, the logical conclusion is Pfizer already has produced their vaccine. We covered this a couple of weeks ago when Pfizer announced that they were producing their vaccine. Okay? The vaccine hasn't even been approved. Isn't this literally putting the cart before the horse? Doesn't the vaccine need to be approved and then shipped? But again, this is Operation Warp Speed. What Pfizer and Moderna are waiting for here in the United States is for the FDA to issue an emergency basis approval. So literally, Pfizer and Moderna are banking on that approval. And of course, they're going to receive it because this has all been planned out. COVID-19, as I'm going to share more evidence in the December issue of Entangled Magazine from prominent scientists with the evidence in hand, published evidence, that COVID-19 was man-made in a laboratory. Now, it doesn't matter if it's Fort Detrick, doesn't matter if it was in Canada, doesn't matter if it was in China in the Wuhan Level 4 biological lab. The virus was created in a laboratory, and I'm presenting the evidence of that. It's not conjecture. So, if they're shipping a vaccine, and the virus was man-made, certainly the vaccine for that virus is, of course, man-made. We all know that it is. That's what they're doing. That's what they've been paid millions of dollars to do. It's a man-made vaccine based on a man-made genomic, RNA genomic sequence created in a laboratory. We know that gene editing has been going on for over 20 years. It's commonplace. This is what GMO foods, now GMO humans, is all about. That's what CRISPR-Cas9 is all about. The gene splicing, the moving around of genes. But we also know from the research published by Dr. Craig Venter out of La Jolla, California, they can 3D print right from a computer model in silico DNA. One of the papers I'm sharing with you in December Entangled specifically cites in silico. That's in the software. Computer designed genomic sequences beginning with the nucleotides. What Dr. Craig Venter has been doing now for over 10 years is the ability to use a 3D bioprinter and print out those nucleotides using an existing Ebola substrate that is alive, or using a yeast substrate that is alive, and in vitro, in the glass, add to it through 3D bioprinting of nucleotides into that living base material, they are able to now grow a new biological mechanism, organism. I call it mechanism because it's a man-made construct, a biological mechanism that is alive. They didn't create life. They had to start with a substrate that was already alive and add to it. But they're changing the host DNA of that substrate, be it Ebola or a yeast, a common yeast. These are commonly used. And they produce, because the host DNA is changed by the introduction of the nucleotides arranged in a computer in silico that bind with the existing host DNA, they produce a new life form. Not life, but form. And I've shared with you the papers, the videos, all of that, backing all of that up. Now, fast forward to COVID-19, they're doing essentially the same thing. They are arranging the RNA in silico in the computer and then outputting it. And the evidence appears to be E. coli. They use Ebola, E. coli, or yeast. Those are the three predominant substrates that are already alive. In vitro, in the glass, in the petri dish, in the test tube. Okay? In vivo is in the body, in a living organism. But they start out in vitro, in the glass, in the test tube, if you will, and then this becomes something that can be introduced into a mouse, into rats, into chimpanzees. AstraZeneca, their vaccine, extracted from a chimpanzee. Okay? This is all built on the shoulders of HIV research. And as I've shared with you so many times, within that in silico construct of COVID, in that single strand of RNA, they have added HIV. Not the entire HIV genomic sequence, not the living virus, only components, only inserts, only fragments of HIV. So this addresses one of the very common questions that I receive. If COVID has HIV in it and someone contracts HIV, is a victim of HIV a carrier for COVID? Not necessarily, but they can. They're someone who's contracted HIV prior to COVID is more susceptible to contracting because of their human immune deficiency. Their immune system's already under attack by HIV, which itself is a virus. And with a weakened immune system, someone with HIV is more prone to contracting COVID-19. Now let's turn that around. If a person contracts COVID-19 and it has these fragments of HIV, is a person contracting HIV? No. No. Okay? Succumbing to COVID, I'm just saying in terms of signs and symptoms, I'm not talking about dying, I'm talking about morbidity. Someone showing the signs and symptoms of COVID has not contracted HIV. COVID only has fragments of the virus. It is not the living HIV virus in COVID itself. Remember, we're talking about two different sides of the line in the sand. One side of the line in the sand, we're talking about the virus with respect to the mark of the beast. The other side of that line is the mark of the beast. That's the vaccine. We'll get to the vaccine in a moment. Okay? Okay? So again, in case people are not hearing me, if you contract COVID, it does not mean that you are contracting HIV. Okay? There's only small fragments, and this is where my surprise is tonight, the number of fragments. I've presented to you the original paper in January of the uncanny discovery, okay? The uncanny similarities. So I'm going to jump right over to my paper here. I'm going to go ahead and give you an introduction to Entangled Magazine, December 1st. The paper I'm citing regarding the 4 inserts is entitled Uncanny Similarity of Unique Inserts in the 2019 Novel COVID Virus Spike Protein to HIV-1, Glycoprotein 120, and GAG. This paper was retracted under duress. It's still public information. You can still find it. Their abstract, I'm going to read a bit of it. We are currently witnessing a major epidemic caused by the 2019 novel coronavirus. This is dated January of this year. The evolution of 2019 novel coronavirus remains elusive. We found 4 insertions in the spike glycoprotein S, which are unique to the 2019 novel coronavirus and are not present in other coronaviruses. Now, I want to emphasize here, okay? We have SARS, which is the most closely associated virus, coronavirus, to COVID-19, SARS. SARS does not have the 4 HIV inserts in its genomic sequence, and yet it is almost identical to COVID-19. Okay? I'll continue. Importantly, amino acid residues in all the 4 inserts have identity or similarity to those in the HIV-1 glycoprotein 120 or HIV-1 GAG. Interestingly, despite the inserts being discontinuous on the primary amino acid sequence, 3D modeling of the 2019 novel coronavirus suggests that they converge to constitute the receptor binding site. What that means is that the 4 HIV inserts merge together at the ACE2 binding site. It promotes binding to the cell on the outer cell membrane, and it does more. We'll get to that. The finding of 4 unique inserts in the 2019 novel coronavirus, all of which have identity and similarity to amino acid residues in key structural proteins of HIV-1, is unlikely to be fortuitous in nature. Fortuitous. Unlikely to be fortuitous. That means it does not arise naturally, either through evolution or through mutation of the virus itself. It does not, in other words, acquire these amino acid residues of HIV-1. They must be inserted deliberately by man because they do not arise fortuitously in nature, according to the authors of this paper from Stanford and India. Okay? Now, there's been questions that have been posed regarding the sample, the RNA sample itself. The original sample that was sequenced in January, within a week of the virus samples being made available to the research community, within a week they were sequenced. There have been many more samples. Let me underscore that. Many more samples of COVID, not just from China, but from Washington State and Seattle in the United States, other locations throughout the United States, other countries like Thailand, Singapore, Italy, Germany, Australia. Okay, so there are many RNA samples out there. And where I'm going to take you is the latest research regarding those latest samples and the number of inserts that have been discovered subsequent to this paper that I'm sharing with you right now. Okay? Let me continue with this just for a little bit further. In the original first sample, with the first 4 inserts, retrieval and alignment of nucleic acid protein sequences. We retrieved all the available coronavirus sequences from the NCBI Viral Genome Database. That's through the NIH, National Institutes of Health. Okay? And they used the GISAID system to retrieve all available full-length sequences of 2019 novel coronavirus on January 27th of this year. Multiple sequence alignment of all coronavirus genomes was performed by using muscle software based on neighbor joining method. Out of 55 coronavirus genomes, 32 representative genomes of all category were used for phylogenetic tree development using MEGAC software. The closest relative was found to be SARS-CoV. The glycoprotein region of SARS-CoV and 2019 novel CoV were aligned and visualized using Mutalin software. The identified amino acid and nucleotide sequence were aligned with whole viral genome database using BLAST-P and BLAST-N. The conservation of the nucleotide sequence were aligned with the whole viral genome database using BLAST-P and BLAST-N, and the conservation of the nucleotide and amino acid motifs in 28 clinical variants. 28 clinical variants of 2019 novel COVID genome. Okay, 28 different variants of the genome were presented by performing multiple sequence alignment using MEGAC software. The three-dimensional structure of 2019 novel CoV glycoprotein was generated by using the Swiss model online server, and the structure was marked and visualized by using PyMol. Okay, so what I'm trying to do here is to put to rest any question as to the purity of the sample, because multiple samples were derived since January, but even in January, these were cross-referenced through multiple filter software programs. Those are the programs I was just reading off to you. Think of them like an Excel spreadsheet filter. Okay? Taking different filters, multiple samples, they were able to cross-reference and cross-check the purity of the sample. Okay? So Perry, if you'll repeat your question later on when we get to the questions, I'll focus on questions and you can bring that question to the forefront again and I'll address it. I don't want to get sidetracked here. We're trying to maintain a train of thought here. welcome the questions. I'm just letting you know. I'm going to go ahead and address your question a little bit later. I want to repeat. You can have a sample that may have contaminant elements to it. But as I read to you, and the researchers, the authors of this paper regarding the inserts, clearly stipulated that those inserts would not fortuitously arise in nature. They are not contaminants insofar as contaminants that would naturally arise, naturally become part of the RNA of COVID. Okay? Those HIV fragments are not alive in the sense of a virus being alive. They therefore have to be placed in there. Other contaminants in a sample would be whole contaminants that are alive in the virus. And with that note, I have a surprise for you. We have some guests here tonight.
Come here. Come here.
Our guests have arrived.
They have. I had to get them while they were awake.
That's right. Hey guys, are you
Hey.
awake?
Hey, come here.
Let me have one. There, come here.
She's feisty.
That's fine. Here, come here. You hold her. I'll hold her.
Oh, watch out.
There we go. There we go.
All right.
All right. So what are their names, my dear? What are their names?
We have Downton right here and Abby.
Hello.
Miss Abby.
Well, Miss
They're
Abby.
7 weeks old. Oh, yes. And full of kisses.
There we go.
Full of loves and kisses. Yes.
All right. So
I
what?
could not take two of them outside though, boy, on leashes. I was getting tangled up like a vine.
So
So,
where do the names come from? Downton and Abby.
yeah.
Hmm. Where do the names come from?
Well, from the miniseries,
Well, speak up.
Downton and Abby.
Tell them so they can hear you.
Well, I am. They know. I mean, anybody that hears the name Downton and Abby knows that it comes from the series. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Isn't that great?
they are sweet.
So again, I want to thank the folks that helped us get these dogs, and they are going to be part of every live stream going forward. So these will be puppy streams. All right, puppy streams. No streams, please.
We've already cleaned up one.
Okay. So that is Downton. That's the male. This is Abby, the female. They're from the same litter. They're brother and sister. We will get them neutered and spayed, of course. But they're a welcome addition to our home. I hope you enjoy watching them grow up with us. We have been given by the breeder specific instructions on how to raise them, how to train them, how to feed them, of course. And
He wants to get with you.
she has a long history of AKC pedigree dogs that she has raised and trained, and so these guys are AKC, and we are very grateful to those that have helped us.
Well, let me put him back out there, and then I'll let you get back, and I'll come get her.
Okay.
All right.
So what do you think, kiddo?
Yeah, come on.
Do you like being on camera? Do you? You like being on camera? Not shy at all. These are English Labs. The American breed of Lab is much more active. They're hyper. They have longer legs than these guys. These are English Labs. They're much more mellow. They're a stockier dog. They're not quite so lean. And they don't have as much stamina as the American breed of Labrador. They tend to get wound up. They're like a little toy. You wind them up, and you let them go, and for a short period they go crazy,
And
and then they just pass out.
Yep. Yep.
So that's what these guys do, and we are so so thankful to have them in our family.
Yes, we are.
All right. Okay. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate you letting me just kind of diverge a little bit in our discussion. I was trying to keep a train of thought there, but I guess I wasn't successful, was I? All right. Let's get the camera back here. And we'll get back to our discussion. Yeah. Boy. Yes, Labradors love to dig holes. We have a fence in the backyard that I've made sure does not have any holes in it or the ability for them to get up underneath it. Okay? Buckminster Fuller. Yeah, that's funny. All right. Okay, guys. So we'll have them in the live stream, each live stream going forward, and we'll try to just have a little levity in the midst of all this somber information that we're having to cover. All right. We like to share as much as we can about, our personal life here with you guys. You're all our friends, and we have our fellowship going on, and this is all part of it. So pups are great. Pups are fun. Okay. I was talking about the contamination of samples and that sort of thing. HIV inserts were placed in the laboratory, and how were they placed there? They were placed using CRISPR-Cas9 technology. Snippets, short genomic sequences, short strands of nucleotides inserted into the genomic sequence of COVID-19. This is what the researchers are pointing out. So please read the December issue of Entangled. If you go all the way back to June and come forward through each of those editions of Entangled magazine, I laid the biological foundational information out and research papers out, backing up what I am presenting to you as fact, as published papers in the December issue. So we're doing a building block learning process in biology to come to grips with what is going on with COVID from a RNA and DNA standpoint. The end point is, because HIV is a retrovirus, it enters the nucleus and binds to the host DNA and permanently changes it. The National Human Genome Research Institute describes a retrovirus, including HIV-1. A retrovirus is a virus that uses RNA as its genetic material. When a retrovirus infects a cell, it makes a DNA copy of its genome that is inserted into the DNA of the host cell. There are a variety of different retroviruses that cause human diseases, such as some forms of cancer and AIDS. Now that's right from the National Human Genome Research Institute. That's their definition of a retrovirus. And the actions of a retrovirus, which is what HIV is, and that includes fragments of HIV, which is what we are seeing with HIV-1, okay? In the magazine, I go through and lay out with images, with graphics, showing the process scientifically of what I just described to you, of the entry into the nucleus and the changing of the host DNA, and then the process of literally going viral. So you'll see the slides in the magazine, and it will lay it out very definitively that this COVID-19 with HIV inserts in the form of a vaccine. This is where we're going to move from our discussion of a virus to our discussion of a vaccine. Again, contracting COVID with these HIV inserts does not qualify as the mark of the beast. It is the sum total in the vaccine of the technologies incorporated in the vaccine. The sum total that produces the mark of the beast. This is where our whole discussion has been regarding the microneedle array patch, although the vaccine will initially be delivered by syringe drawn up from a vial as a fluid and delivered through a hypodermic needle. Okay? It can also be delivered through a pneumatic gun, an injector gun that uses air to deliver the vaccine material, the fluid, under high pressure through the skin into the skin and the capillaries. In the final delivery of the mark of the beast, it will be to the greater population. The greater population of the world will receive the vaccine by way of the microneedle array patch. And that is in the fourth step in the distribution and inoculation scenario. Remember, we've shared with you from WHO and from CDC, there will be 4 phases, not testing phases, but 4 phases of inoculation. This is the first inoculation. The first 3 will be attempted by way of the syringe and needle. The fourth phase will be by microneedle array patch. That's because they will, again, and this is planned this way, this is engineered this way, they will be unsuccessful in distributing and delivering the actual injections in the first 3 phases of the CDC. That's by design, because they want to build up the fear, build up the anxiety in the global population to the point, to the peak, where they will demand the final solution. The solution to the problem that is engineered, is that they cannot get the delivery by way of a hypodermic needle to enough people fast enough. Okay, let me repeat that. The problem that they are building towards, that the global population will finally discover, is that they cannot get the injections to enough people fast enough. Fast enough is, by their definition of fast enough, in Operation Warp Speed in the United States, which applies to the global population as a whole. Okay? So the inoculations are going to fail by design, therefore people will demand the final solution to the delivery of the vaccine. That final solution is the microneedle array patch. Okay? So we've got that. Okay? What is contained in the microneedle array patch goes beyond what is in the syringes, but it's much the same. Yes, all 4 phases change your DNA. Good question, critical reasoner. When the vaccine is delivered, either through a hypodermic needle, phases 1, 2, and 3, or by the microneedle array final solution, phase 4, all deliveries of the vaccine will change a person's DNA because it contains the retrovirus HIV-1, fragments of HIV-1. HIV-1 is not a fully formed virus when it is carried by COVID-19. It's only portions, only fragments. It is not the full living HIV virus. I'm being repetitive because when I get email questions, many times I've already answered those questions and people are not hearing me in the live stream. So I'm being repetitive in order to answer those questions. the bottom line is do not take the vaccine. Doesn't matter how it's delivered, doesn't matter how it's administered to a person. Any COVID-19 vaccine contains the retrovirus fragments of HIV-1, and they function as the retrovirus functions. Okay? So we're talking fragments, not forms. The 4 fragments. Minnesota Lakes, hold your question. We're going to answer that as I move further and deeper into this presentation. You'll get the answer to that question. Okay? So hold your questions, write them down on a piece of paper, hold your questions. If I don't answer it between now and the time that I stop and say, okay, I'll take questions, then go ahead and present it. Okay? So don't ask the questions in the chat room right now. I'm not going to address them because it takes me off track. I'm going to stay focused. So, beginning with the very first injection of the COVID-19 vaccine, the DNA will be changed. Now, to further confuse people, we know that Dr. Fauci, the CDC, the WHO are all saying there's going to be the requirement for a second round of vaccination. Okay? They're saying you're going to have 2 shots. Okay? They want to make sure that the DNA is permanently changed. I'm not so sure they're going to have time to get to the second round. I think they are going to find that they don't need the second round because the microneedle array patch, which contains the quantum dots, luciferase, the hydrogels, the RNA sequence of COVID-19, the HIV-1 fragment, genomic fragments are all included. They're going to find that when they put together with the microneedle array patch delivery that they've accomplished what they set out to accomplish. And that is that the majority of the global population undergoes DNA transformation. Permanent DNA transformation. Okay? So, what changes the DNA, again, is clearly spelled out in the pages of Entangled Magazine leading up to December and the December issue. The shorthand of all the evidence in the pages of the magazine, if you will take the time to read the magazine, it will in depth explain, scientifically explain, what it is that I am abbreviating here tonight. So please read the magazine if you want the definitive, precise, evidence-based explanation of what I'm abbreviating tonight. The DNA is changed with the RNA-based vaccine. DNA-based vaccines do not change the host DNA. The leading candidates to be approved for distribution and injection are messenger RNA-based, Pfizer and Moderna. There will be other messenger RNA-based vaccines from other manufacturers. If you read the scientific literature regarding DNA-based vaccines and messenger RNA-based vaccine, you will see that the vaccine community is shifting predominantly shifting their research to messenger RNA. In other words, again, I'm being brief here. The vaccines that will change a person's DNA are the messenger RNA-based vaccines. Now, how did I get there? The messenger RNA-based vaccines are based upon the messenger RNA sequence of COVID-19 itself. Many of you that are medically trained, that have a background in biology, background in genetics, you understand that RNA does not enter by itself, does not enter the cell. If this is where I'm going to lose people in terms of complexity, please read the magazine. RNA enters the fluid of a cell. It enters the cytoplasm, the cytosol. Ordinarily, RNA will express a protein that exits the cytoplasm and binds to the receptor site on the outer cell membrane. In this particular case of messenger RNA, COVID-19, it is altered by way of the HIV-1 inserts. This is not conjecture. This is not me stretching a point. This is not me trying to force a round peg into a square hole in order to fit a theory. I'm going to share with you some of the scientific information in a few minutes from the magazine that backs up that statement. Because the fragments of HIV-1 are contained in the messenger RNA of COVID, those same HIV-1 inserts are carried over to the vaccine. This is where messenger RNA with the 4 inserts changes what RNA normally does, which is to express a protein in the cytosol. It moves from that fluid in the cell, crosses through the nuclear pore complex, of which there are many nuclear pore complexes, in the double wall membrane of the nucleus. It enters into the nucleus because it is acting, HIV-1, the fragments are acting as a vector to carry that messenger RNA from the cytosol into the nucleus, where it ordinarily would not travel. You have HIV-1, a retrovirus, which by definition that I just read to you, binds to the host DNA. How does it get there? It moves through the nuclear pore complex into the nucleus. That's what a retrovirus does. That's how it goes viral. By binding to the host cell DNA, permanently changing it, it is now a viral DNA. It produces, and I'm going to get ahead of myself here, but it produces another single strand of messenger RNA that then exits the cell, goes to the next cell, and enters the cell and goes viral. That's how a virus operates. A virus, specifically a retrovirus, because there are other forms of viruses. A retrovirus enters the nucleus, binds to the DNA, changes the DNA, produces a now virus RNA that moves to the next cell and changes that cell's DNA. and it is now infected with the original virus. This is how HIV operates. This is how a retrovirus operates. This is the reason for those fragments of HIV to have been inserted into the man-made, man-constructed messenger RNA COVID-19 genomic sequence. Okay? Man placed the HIV fragments into a man-made virus. Yes, it can be a weakened flu virus, COVID-19, but the insidious part of this is it moves to the host cell, moves to the host DNA of the cell. And this is how COVID-19 spreads. It is now a retrovirus. I don't think you've ever heard anybody refer to COVID-19 as a retrovirus, because the information regarding the 4 HIV inserts has been so suppressed. Just like I gave you the 30-year scenario regarding HIV and AIDS research, that mainstream narrative has carried forward to today with COVID-19. Suppression of papers in which bona fide scientists performing the normal sequence evaluation, the filtering process of the genomic sequences, discovered the HIV. That was suppressed, and they continue to try to suppress it. But I have new information for you tonight that they're trying to suppress, but we're going to present it to you tonight. I'm trying to make, before I get into the new information, it absolutely solid in everyone's mind that COVID-19 is a retrovirus because it contains components of a retrovirus. Now, again, this is on the side of the line in the sand where we're talking just virus. We're not talking mark of the beast yet. That's the vaccine side of the line in the sand. A person contracting the retrovirus, as I'm going to continue to refer to it from now on, COVID-19, they can contract the virus and it can go viral and spread to other people. It doesn't mean that it's any more deadly than the seasonal flus. Doesn't mean that it's that kind of a problem. Mortality, the rate of mortality going up because HIV-1 fragments are in it. And I want to reinforce this. What it does, and I present the scientific evidence in the magazine this month, it increases its ability to be transmitted. It's transmissibility that increases morbidity. Morbidity is the illness, not death. That's mortality. But morbidity, people who are suffering the effects of the virus, that increases the number of people suffering the effects of the virus, but they survive it. That's morbidity. It increases transmissibility, thus increasing morbidity. But it does not, according to the researchers' own papers, it does not increase the rate of death, the mortality rate. I want to make that very clear. If you, let me just sort of pause my dissertation for a moment here. I want to check the chat room. Okay, here's the deal. Okay, SERF class, S-E-R-F, Dawn, in chat room. Dawn, it's S-E-R-F. I just happen to see this flash on the screen. I don't know the context of your posting, Dawn. It is S-E-R-F. I just posted on my YouTube channel, just made it public, on my YouTube channel, the interview that had been mislabeled as having taken place in 2014. It was actually in 2013. That's semantics. The video that I'm talking about, Don, I present surf. No problem, Don. You don't have to apologize. It's okay. Serfdom, yes. A slave class. That's where I first presented the surf class scenario regarding the MERS coronavirus at the time, which was the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. And I talked about exactly what I'm talking about now, that those that take the vaccine for MERS would have their DNA permanently changed, and that it is the mark of the beast. I said that in 2013. Actually, it was January of that year. I've reposted that. Doug Diamond from Diamond Digital Media, who keeps everything happening behind the scenes here on Patch Airlines. He does all the video for us. He does all of the website for us. He does the cover of every issue of Entangled Magazine. Doug is my right arm. Diamond Digital Media. He took out the music in the original video. Okay? I went to a friend. First time I ever did a public YouTube video. Never been on YouTube before. Asked him to please videotape what I had to say in 2013. Okay? Unfortunately, he placed some music under that video presentation while I was speaking. And I asked Doug, because Doug is an audio engineer by profession, Doug was able to take out the music and then repost that video for me. Because many of you have been telling me by way of email that that video that is being mirrored on a lot of other YouTube channels, and has been for a couple of years now, is being deleted by YouTube. So we reposted my original first public presentation, and it was about what we're talking about tonight from 2013 on my YouTube channel, because it is my own information, my own video. And we took the music out. So it's there because it's being taken down by other people, which I'm happy they posted. I'm happy they mirrored on their own YouTube channels. Okay? All right. Okay. Yes, Doug Diamond in the rough. That's right, Critical Reasoner. Let's move on. I feel like I need to get to the punchline here, so I'm going to do that. Let's get to the new information. We know that it's a retrovirus. We know that COVID is entering a person's DNA, but it is changing the DNA. Let us focus. We're still on the vaccine side of the line in the sand. Excuse me, I'm confusing you. We are still on the virus side of the line in the sand. We're not talking vaccine yet. We're talking virus. In the viral action of COVID and changing a person's DNA, that is not mark of the beast changing the DNA. That is changing the DNA as a virus so that it promotes the spread of the virus. Line in the sand, talking virus. HIV-1 is included in COVID because the HIV-1 is the vector to get COVID as a virus into and bind to a person's DNA, thus spreading the infection because it changed the DNA. But that, at that point, is not the mark of the beast changing of a person's DNA. Okay? I hope that's clear. I hope I can move on from that. Okay? Wow. I know I'm really hammering on this, but it has to be absolutely clear to everyone what it is that's going on. part of my narrative in the magazine I want to read to you. Okay? This process, and these are my own words, this process illustrates how HIV-1 accomplishes two tasks. First, acting as a vector for the entry of 2019 novel coronavirus into the cytoplasm of the cell. Second, entry of both HIV and the coronavirus into the cell nucleus, thereby gaining access to the host human cell's DNA to permanently alter it. There is a biological symmetry between COVID and HIV-1, with one requiring the natural characteristics of the other. They work in concert with one another, each acting as a vector for the other. A vector is an organism that does not cause disease by itself, but which spreads infection by conveying pathogens from one host to another. Now, this is where we're transitioning, we're making our segue into new information. Within their respective papers, research scientist Prashant Pradhan, that's from the Indian paper on the 4 inserts, and Dr. Montague and his researcher Jean-Claude Perez noted within the complete genomic RNA sequence of COVID, the fragments of HIV, meaning COVID-19 virus itself exists due to the presence of HIV-1. The spread or virality of COVID-19 is dependent upon these fragments of HIV. This is the aforementioned gain of function. Okay, that's further up in the magazine. I didn't read it to you, but we've talked about gain of function before, and I expand upon extensively gain of function in the magazine. Okay? All right. Let me get down to the really new information. In the following, we are presenting published, I'm saying Kathleen and myself, we are presenting published research from well-known and respected scientists, including that of Dr. Luc Anton Montague, the 2008 Nobel laureate in physiology or medicine for his discovery of the human immunodeficiency virus HIV. Okay? In previous editions of this magazine, we have cited the paper entitled Uncanny Similarity of Unique Inserts in the 2019 Novel Coronavirus Spike Protein to HIV-1 Glycoprotein 120 and GAG, authored by Prashant Pradhan et al. Okay? I shared some of that. We now offer as a follow-on, this is where we're moving forward in time, folks. This is further research. Building upon the 4 inserts research, we're moving forward. We now offer, we, Kathleen and myself, we now offer as a follow-on to the above, the latest research from that of Dr. Montague and his co-researcher Jean-Claude Perez, beginning with the paper entitled COVID-19, SARS, and Bats Coronaviruses Genomes, Peculiar Homologous RNA Sequences. That's the title of the paper. I'm going to give you the punchline from that paper as an excerpt. I'm quoting right from the paper. I'm going to give it to you right up front. 18 RNA fragments of homology equal or more than 80% with human or simian retroviruses have been found in the COVID-19 genome. HIV-1 with a crucial spike mutation. How do you like them apples? We just jumped from 4 HIV inserts to 18. Okay? We started with 4 in January, and mid-year this year, these scientists discovered because they took more samples from around the world that were made available because COVID was spreading. They were able to obtain more sample sites and run the RNA of COVID. And they found with more site samples, not just a repetition, not just a confirmation of 4 HIV inserts in COVID, but now they have found 18. Does the number 18 mean anything to you? I'm watching the chat room. Does the number 18 mean anything to you? Okay? I'm looking in the chat rooms, both of them, to see if this means anything to you guys. I don't want to take away from the people that are trying to maintain some continuity here listening to me, who are not in the chat room. Perfect. You guys are getting it. You guys you're all over it. 666. 18 HIV inserts is 666. Thank you. You guys got it. You got it. Okay? That's pretty astounding. 18 means 6 plus 6 plus 6. Okay? Pretty amazing. Thank you, guys. I love talking to you guys. You're all over it. But there's more. As they say on the infomercials, but there's more. But wait, there's more. Through the 14 facts, now this is an excerpt from the paper, and believe me, they go through and very deliberately present their evidence, listing 14 facts in 14 paragraphs in this article. So please read this so you have the full context of the research, the full context of how they arrived at 18 inserts, and the full understanding. You've got to read. This is what I was going to say earlier. Again, let me stop. We have been presenting to well over 500 people now the PDF Rooftop regarding the Mark of the Beast and its delivery by way of the microneedle array patch. And we are going to continue sending that free PDF. If you want the PDF, send me an email. Go to anthonypatch.com, go to the contact tab at the top of the home page, click on contact, send me an email. In the subject line, simply write PDF, and I will send you Project Rooftop, Mark of the Beast microneedle array patch. It includes what we're talking about. Now, that's a great witnessing tool, Project Rooftop. The December issue, if you're going to share any issue of the magazine, December's the issue to share. The reason I'm saying that is it pulls all of the other issues together. Share December. 18 inserts of HIV. The papers, the evidence. Share December with people, please. Okay? Excerpt. Through the 14 facts relating to each of the 14 paragraphs of this article, everything converges toward possible laboratory manipulations, which contributed to modifications of the genome of COVID-19, but also, very probably, much older SARS, with perhaps this double objective of vaccine design and gain of function in terms of penetration of this virus into the cell. That's from their paper. This is from a Nobel laureate, not Anthony Patch. When I say gain of function, as they're saying gain of function, that is, the gain of function is to have HIV, a retrovirus, which binds to the host DNA naturally, act as a vector to carry COVID-19 into the host DNA and increase the ability of COVID to continue to act as a virus and infect more cells in the body and therefore more people. It increases the gain of function, increases the ability of the virus to spread. As they go on through their paper, they reinforce the point that it does not necessarily increase the rate of death. Morbidity increases, but mortality does not, according to this Nobel laureate. Okay? The conclusions of these scientists, these are my words, the conclusions of these scientists and others cited herein are the genome COVID-19 was man-made in a laboratory and contains not simply 4 inserts as cited by Prashant et al., but 18 of human or simian retrovirus HIV-1. With respect to the gain of function objective, this is for the purpose of increasing the rate of infection, the pathogenic transmissibility or morbidity of a virus within a host population, not necessarily leading to an increased number of mortalities. This is leveraging the natural processes of a virus in increasing the quantity of infected hosts without killing them off. Okay? Those are my words. I'm summarizing their research. A virus wants to continue to live, so it's not going to kill the host. It wants more hosts so it, as a virus, can transmit and survive through a larger host population. It doesn't want to kill off the population, the virus I'm speaking of. Okay? So, the Nobel laureate, Luc Montagnier, I have a quote here from him in the magazine. This virus was manipulated meticulously. It's not natural. Not the words of Anthony Patch, but of a Nobel laureate who discovered HIV. That's what he received his Nobel Prize for. Okay? Now I have an article here, I'm just going to read the title of it that's in the magazine, regarding gain of function. Gain of function research, ethical analysis. It comes from Science, Engineering, Ethics in 2016. And I go through and explain gain of function and the dangers of gain of function research. HIV inserted into COVID is gain of function research. Okay? If you want to know more about that before the magazine comes out on December 1st, just Google gain of function. It will open your eyes up as to what is going on, because it is exactly what is going on with COVID. Okay? Okay. I'm going to read this from Oxford Languages. Okay? A retrovirus is any group of RNA viruses which insert a DNA copy of their genome into the host cell in order to replicate it. For example, HIV. Look up retroviruses Oxford Languages. That's their definition, not mine. Okay? Okay. The next paper in the magazine. Unusual features of SARS-CoV-2 genome, suggesting sophisticated laboratory modification rather than natural evolution, and delineation of its probable synthetic root. This is from an entirely different group of researchers. Li Meng Yan, MD and PhD, Xu Kang, PhD, Ji Zhuan, PhD, and the rest of these just go on and on. Let me read their final remarks from their paper. This is published in Entangled Magazine, the entire paper. Well, I link out to the entire paper, but let me read their final remarks. Many questions remain unanswered about the origin of SARS-CoV-2. Now, that's COVID. Don't be misled. This is when they were still calling this. They were still referring to this as SARS/CoV/2. Prominent virologists have implicated in a Nature Medicine letter that laboratory escape, while not being entirely ruled out, was unlikely, and that no sign of genetic manipulation is present in the SARS-CoV-2 genome. That's what the publication, the journal Nature Medicine, said. Here's what these researchers say to the contrary. However, here we show that genetic evidence within the spike gene of SARS-CoV-2 genome, restriction sites flanking the RBM, that's the RNA binding motif proteins, that spike genome tandem are rare codons used at the inserted furin cleavage site does exist and suggests that the SARS-CoV-2 genome should be a product of genetic manipulation. Furthermore, the proven concepts, well-established techniques, and knowledge and expertise are all in place for the convenient creation of this novel coronavirus in a short period of time. Okay? So I go on and I explain what the binding of protein process is, how gene coding is done, how things are moved around in the magazine. Okay? They lay out in their final comments, their final remarks, 4 separate steps in creating artificially COVID-19. You can read that in the magazine. They definitively provide the evidence that this was laboratory produced and released from a laboratory. They don't provide the motives for that release, but they are definitive in their evidence that it was released. Okay? So we not only have 18 inserts now, but we have more prominent researchers saying that it's man-made and saying that they are finding evidence that it was created in a laboratory. Debunking those journals out there that are trying to, as in the 30-year case of COVID, the pattern of HIV for 30 years, suppressing the truth, suppressing alternative research and alternative findings. So you have suppression and censorship taking place within the scientific journals themselves. Not all of them, but some of them. Okay? Again, Nature Medicine, published 17 March of 2020, the paper that was referred to in this paper, the article, Nature Medicine, the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2. They go through and debunk the whole idea that it was created in a laboratory and released, escaped from a laboratory. They make the case in Nature Medicine that this was through bats, pangolins, crossing the barrier between animal and human. They're pushing the animal direction, not the laboratory direction. Well, you have a Nobel laureate and many other researchers saying completely the opposite based upon their analysis of the genetic information. The fingerprints in this forensic analysis, again, we're talking court of law. We're using forensics here, folks. This is what they're doing in these papers. Specifically, they're talking about forensics, genetic forensics, just like we've been talking about. Genetic forensics means that you can take a genomic sequence and you can find its origins. You can retrace it genetically. There are databases that I cited to you in the very first paper that I presented to you here tonight regarding the 4 HIV inserts. The databases that were consulted to prove that 4 inserts, and this was repeated proving the 18 inserts, using a broader sample base from multiple sample sites, not just a handful. Those databases of genomic sequences, think of those as DNA databases, if you will, because literally they are. They can trace the DNA. I'm putting this in layman's terms. They can trace the DNA of COVID-19, and that's what they've done. Okay? They're not making this up. This is not conjecture. These scientists are putting their careers on the line. But their own morals and ethics dictate that they release the truth to the world, and that's what they're doing. That's what we're trying to do through the pages of Entangled Magazine. Release the truth about COVID. It's a retrovirus, COVID-19, because it contains a retrovirus, fragments of a retrovirus that convey COVID into the host cell DNA, binding to that DNA. That's a retroviral action that then causes the virus to spread further, as a retrovirus does. Therefore, COVID-19 is a retrovirus and should be labeled, should be named as a retrovirus. But this is what they're suppressing, that it's a retrovirus. This is what you need to get across to people. If you need to make it extremely simple to someone who knows nothing about biology and DNA, they need to first understand, before you even talk to them about the vaccine, they need to understand that the virus itself binds to a person's DNA, and that causes it to spread because it's a retrovirus. Okay? Please read the magazine for clarification, for further evidence, for specific numbers, to make it as cogent for you as possible. Please read the magazine. Okay? Now let's cross the line in the sand to the vaccine and talk about Mark of the Beast, and then we're going to open up for questions. The virus itself does not qualify as the Mark of the Beast. The virus itself is a retrovirus, but it does not qualify as the Mark of the Beast. It is only the vaccine, because the vaccine contains more than just the retrovirus. This is what is really important to understand, pinpoint, clear, definitive. The vaccine is there to act as a vector. COVID-19 is simply the vector to carry the other technologies that do qualify as the mark of the beast. COVID-19 acts as a vector to carry the other components that thus comprise the totality of the mark of the beast. Quantum dots, luciferase, hydrogel, antenna system for 5G for electroporation of the cell wall, the outer membrane. Okay? You have a system in the mark of the beast beyond COVID-19's vaccine, beyond the vaccine. The vaccine now, we crossed the line in the sand, talking vaccine. In order for the vaccine to qualify as the mark of the beast, it must deliver as a vector. COVID is the vector to carry the quantum dots, luciferase, hydrogel, antenna system for 5G. Okay? That is delivered through the hypodermic needle. And it is also later delivered by the microneedle array patch. With the greater percentage of the population, the greater percentage of the global population will receive the vaccine mark of the beast combined technologies, quantum dots, luciferase, hydrogel, 5G antenna system, by way of the microneedle array patch, because it does not need to be refrigerated and does not require a medically trained person to inject it. It is applied like a Band-Aid. Okay? Please understand there's more to the mark of the beast than simply COVID-19 and 18 HIV-1 inserts. There's more that is required to qualify the vaccine as the mark of the beast. Those other components of technology must be carried into the body. Please understand that the grand delusion about COVID-19, the plandemic, the engineering of all of this scenario is for the singular purpose of the delivery of those technological components that do comprise, in totality, the mark of the beast. I hope I'm making this clear. The excuse to put quantum dots, luciferase, hydrogels, and a 5G antenna system into your body, a biosensor system, the excuse to get into every person's body, this biosensor system, connecting you to the blockchain infrastructure of the beast system, the excuse to deliver those technologies into your body is COVID-19. Okay? All of those components combined together into the vaccine is the mark of the beast, not the virus itself. The virus is the excuse. The excuse to put into your body a biosensor system, a biomarker system, a system that will, through quantum entanglement and 5G, initially 5G, but then quantum entanglement of the artificial atoms comprised only of entangled electrons known as quantum dots, marking you with luciferase that radiates in the near infrared spectrum, only visible through an application on a smartphone or other sensor device such as that, will connect a person through 5G and then through quantum entanglement with the quantum computers that utilize quantum entangled electrons as well as the quantum entangled electrons delivered by the microneedle array patch and or the hypodermic needle syringe delivery system. The excuse to put all of that infrastructure into your body to connect with the blockchain infrastructure of the beast system, the excuse is the retrovirus COVID-19. Those are all the pieces. That's the scenario. On one side of the line in the sand is the excuse under problem, reaction, solution, Hegelian dialectic, modus operandi. Okay? All of that just to cross that line in the sand to then deliver in totality the mark of the beast, calling it a vaccine. Okay? Please read the magazine for all the context and for all the details. I cannot give the whole thing in a live stream. I'm already over 2 hours. That's why we publish Entangled Magazine, to give you the totality of what we can. And even in the magazine doesn't cover all the evidence. Okay? Otherwise it would just end up being a book. It would be so long. I have to take the highlight, the most impactful papers that I can distill down and provide to you. This is not a long, exhaustive edition of Entangled Magazine. It's purposefully shorter than other issues of Entangled, because I'm trying to get you to focus on the most impactful evidence that Kathleen and I have been able to assemble since we've been talking to you. Share the December issue of Entangled Magazine, please. If you're a subscriber, if you're a patron, if you're a subscriber just as a subscriber to the magazine, or if you're a patron and because you're a patron, you're receiving the magazine, share the December issue. It's in a PDF form. Download the PDF. Spread it. It's short because I want it not to be overwhelming for someone who is brand new to this discussion. I didn't want them to look at this and go, well, this is 120 pages. I'm not reading this. It's about 50 or so pages. Okay? It's digestible. I take it and translate the papers throughout. You'll see my own commentary throughout where I digest this for people, make it understandable for the layperson, but provide the scientific evidence so that even if you don't understand the papers, you see that it is evidence. And those that do understand the papers can then, in their understanding of biology and DNA, share that with other people that are scientifically inclined. So I'm trying to reach the broader spectrum of the entire audience with this issue. Okay? All right. I want to take questions. I'm going to start with the Twitch chat room. I will jump over, after we get through some questions on Twitch, I'm going to jump over to DLive, to that chat room, and take some questions. Okay? So DLive, hang on to your questions for a few minutes while I address Twitch and see if there are any questions in there. I don't mind taking the questions. I may just say read the magazine, because it will answer it more definitively and more exhaustively. Okay? How about the snake venom DNA? Critical Reasoner's asking. Okay. We have not gone further than what we've presented regarding the snake venom DNA. We still suspect that research regarding the actions of venom upon the DNA are built into this vaccine for COVID. But I don't have anything definitive to update you, Critical Reasoner, on that question, on that research of snake venom. It really hasn't risen to the top as being all that impactful. Not like these 18 HIV inserts. The impact of that upon what we are looking at has been way above what we've seen in the snake venom DNA. But it does not take away from the fact that the changing of the DNA has its origins in the serpent from the Garden of Eden. Okay? Just like the hypodermic needle and the microneedle array needles all found their origins in the hollow fang of the pit viper. Okay? So they are all intertwined in the snake. Okay? All right, let's see. So Rocky, are you asking me, did I see the sores on the volunteer from the Pfizer vaccine? Yes, I did. Let's see, what else is going on? Okay, MRC5 is from a fetus. What we're talking about are T cells from the fetus. I think that's what you're referring to. And yes, these are cells from an aborted fetus. Okay? Not a living fetus, as far as I've seen. How long will it take for the vaccine mark to take effect on a person's body and mind? Do you think they will delay the effect until a particular time? Buckminster's asking. That is a very interesting question because on the one hand, I've talked about 5G and the flipping of the switch at a specific time. In other words, getting enough of the population inoculated with the vaccine, and then at a specific moment, throwing the 5G switch, as I sort of place it, and then everyone's DNA suddenly being changed, including their body and mind. That is the more likely direction, that they will delay the effect, because if early adopters of the vaccine do not present with any untoward side effects, then that would forestall and discourage subsequent vaccinations. So I think that because 5G, the antenna system of 5G, is embedded in this biosensor delivered by way of the vaccine delivery, that there will be a particular time, Buckminster, at which literally the 5G switch will be thrown, because then the majority of the population simultaneously will undergo that change that I described back in January of 2013 in my video that you can see now on my YouTube channel, at least until they pull it down, because they pulled 2 videos now. I think YouTube is marching quickly towards dropping my channel, pulling my channel, so just be aware of that. We'll go to the other platforms, and we'll let you know where to find us. But I do think they will wait until there's, let's say, 80% of the population. Bill Gates talks about got to have 80%. I think, as I said in January of 2013, when they throw the switch, people will no longer be aware of their previous life. They will no longer be aware that they have even undergone a change, because at that point their mind is altered and they are connected by way of 5G and quantum entanglement to the hive mind of the virtual reality created and administered by quantum computing, itself opening doorways for possession. What they are creating, and Buckminster, you started me on a real good track here. What they are creating in the changing of the DNA is a host. They are creating a host that will be possessed by one or more demonic entities. Okay? Flip the switch. The host is now open to demonic possession. Then we see in Revelation the 5 months in which they are presenting with sores and boils and seeking death but not finding it for 5 months. That 5 months, I believe that clock begins to tick when they throw the switch of 5G, and then everyone's DNA changes. Remember, the mark of the beast is embedded with multiple technologies. Okay? And we've illustrated those components in Entangled Magazine. Okay, another question. Is HIV man-made? According to these other researchers that I've quoted here in the December issue of Entangled Magazine, according to those researchers, HIV is man-made. It is a man-made construct. They come right out in it in the papers. Read the papers. Okay? Very good question. Short and to the point. Very good. All right. All right. I'm scanning down through the Twitch chat room from that question. Will symptoms from the vaccine not show up until 5G is switched on or make existing symptoms more severe? Okay, I think we answered that one. All right. Right. Okay, so in the chat room, have you heard of Dr. Judy Mikovits? Yes, we are citing her work. Yes, Mikovits, not in the December issue, but we have in the past. Yes, she is saying that Dr. Fauci was working on Dr. Fauci in the early 80s was working on a vaccine for HIV. And according to Dr. Judy Mikovits, they covered up her whistleblowing regarding that HIV vaccine. And she is saying that it alters a person's DNA. Okay? So that's her research in short. Question, Libra. Yes, I posted an article to the patrons about Libra. It appears that in January, certainly early next year, but it appears that perhaps in January, Libra is going to be accepted as a currency, not a global currency yet. It will be the singular under the Antichrist. Libra will be the single global currency, but they are going to approve as a cryptocurrency, going to approve Libra to be bought and sold. It is not yet in January going to be approved as a broad-based currency for transactions, for buying and selling, but it will be at some point. They are continuing to add to the basket of currencies backing Libra. And again, we published this extensively in Entangled Magazine earlier this year. You can look at our explanations of Libra, but it will eventually be the only currency for the entire global population. It is the mark of the beast currency. Okay. If there's 18 HIV inserts in the vaccine, will people get AIDS or just mutate to weird animals? Good question. No, they will not get AIDS. Again, these are fragments of HIV. This is not the entire genomic sequence of the virus. They will not get AIDS from this. At least according to the researchers that I've presented, they are not saying that a person will get AIDS from the 18 HIV inserts. They're simply saying these are vectors to get COVID into and change the host DNA so that it will spread as a virus. Okay? Good question. Mr. Wilson is saying that carbon nanotubes could be the delay mechanism that may be triggered. Yes, carbon nanotubes act as that antenna system that I mentioned earlier. Yes. Okay. Okay, critical reasoner. It won't happen till electroporation. Let's clarify electroporation. Electroporation, as we presented in many live streams and in the magazine, is to cause the outer cell membrane to be perforated by the impact of the 5G electromagnetic energy. The energy is causing, this is done in the laboratory all the time, electroporation, to introduce new genetic material into a cell by making the cell more permeable. Now, 5G, when the switch is thrown, will increase the number of holes in the outer cell membrane, allowing even more of the components of the mark of the beast to enter into the cell. Remember, the quantum dots, the luciferase, the hydrogel, all of these are entering into the cell, and they do that through electroporation. That itself is brought on by the flipping of the 5G switch, that increasing the permeability, creating holes in the outer cell membrane. Are these vaccine test subjects already marked with the biosensor system, therefore damned? The test subjects marked with the biosensor system, no, they are not therefore damned. They are not receiving the mark of the beast. They are not receiving the biosensor system. They are only receiving the RNA that contains the HIV inserts, but they are not receiving all of the other technological components that I just listed. Okay, so they are not damned. Very good question. I've received that question many times. The test subjects are not damned. Okay? Oh, let's see. What about 4G, etc.? Yeah, when 5G is triggered, 4G also continues to be broadcast. But 4G, according to the scientific literature, for those that are whistleblowers, the scientists that are publishing information about 5G, the dangers of 5G, 4G so far is not functioning as the mechanism of electroporation. Okay? Has anyone taken or applied the microneedle array patch delivery system? No. Not for the COVID-19 vaccine trials. Those are hypodermic needle delivered. In some cases, they are in the form of a nasal spray, but these are typically injected. When we're talking specifically messenger RNA-based vaccines, those are injected by a hypodermic needle. Presently, they are not in those tests, in the phase 3 testing. Those test subjects are not receiving the test vaccine, the trial vaccine by microneedle array. Now, even if they were, they are not necessarily comprised of the quantum dots, luciferase, hydrogel, and the 5G antenna system. in those test subjects. They do not want the test subjects to have those components at this point. Okay? All right. Do you know if Craig Venter's work is tied to today's vaccines? Yes. It is the foundational. This is why, since his work became very public in 2010, and we have published his work in the magazine. Back in 2017, we started highlighting Craig Venter in Entangled Magazine in 2017. All of his work into mapping the human genome, leading to the ability to use CRISPR-Cas9 to cut and splice the genome, leading to the ability to in silico model the human genome, and then use a 3D bioprinter to bioprint the custom sequence of the human genome or animal or plant genomes. All of that has led to today's vaccines, specifically the messenger RNA vaccine. Craig Venter is all about messenger RNA. Okay? He has carried, as the tip of the spear, Craig Venter has carried the entire pharmaceutical industry into messenger RNA. Okay? Great question. Will it take a few days to have the virus or mark become fully effective in a body much the same way a virus does? No. The virus will begin to spread, but the mark of the beast with the vaccine, remember there's a line in the sand. On one side of the line is the virus discussion. The mark of the beast is the other side of the discussion. If you're talking about the side that is the virus, which is not the mark, the virus does take several days to become fully effective in the body. But the mark itself is the vaccine, not the virus. It's a weakened form of the vaccine. The mark itself will be instantaneous when the 5G switch is thrown. It will not take several days to be effective. Okay? All right. Will the people who take the mark be experiencing a virtual reality? Yes, they will be connected to the sentient world simulation, the virtual reality driven by quantum computing. Okay? That's the hive mind, the virtual reality. That's where every person is represented as a node within the software systems of Palantir software, providing as a third party the software to D-Wave and to other quantum computing companies. In the Palantir software running quantum computing, in the virtual reality, every person is represented as a node in the software, and then they are given an avatar in that virtual reality. Okay? I feel that has somewhat happened already to some. Yeah, they could be. All right. Isn't that what they are pretty much doing in New York? California wants to allow killing your child until the age of 3. Yeah, that is. Yeah, you guys are talking to each other, not me. All right. Okay. G Fox, you said that unless you're getting strikes, yes, I have one strike on my channel. They pulled down COVID Viper from October. They pulled it down just last week. I announced it just a few days ago. My first strike on the channel. Now they've pulled a second video off my channel, which was invalid use of PCR testing. Probably I will get a second strike for that. Okay? So they're about to pull my channel down, G Fox. All right? Just letting everybody know real time what's going on. How many quantum computers will be out there globally? Well, that's not real clear, but I will tell you that of the named companies and the named government research laboratories, and extrapolating the other companies like IBM that are involved, and the fact that now we have D-Wave, IBM, and others that are making their computers accessible through the cloud using third-party developers like Palantir. It doesn't matter how many physical quantum computers are out there globally. What really matters is how many organizations, businesses, governments, laboratories, universities, how many have access. Think about the latest news on quantum computers being accessed through the cloud is through financial hedge funds and portfolio managers. The financial sector accessing the quantum computers because of their speed of transactions. Okay? So they're pushing the third-party development of global cloud-based access to quantum computers. Okay? Let's see. GFox, thank you for your efforts in trying to get my channel remonetized. I have been unsuccessful for 4 years to get my channel remonetized. This is why we began our live streams on Patreon, was because my channel was demonetized over 4 years ago. I do not think they're going to allow me to be monetized again. Why do you think the CDC/WHO and NHS UK say they have isolates of the virus and have no evidence of proving the existence via Koch postulates? CDC 2019 novel coronavirus real-time RT-PCR diagnostic panel. Loyalty, I'm sorry, I don't quite understand your question because it's a rather long question. Why do you think they say they have isolates of the virus and have no evidence of proving the existence via Koch postulates? It sounds like an oxymoron. If they have isolates of the virus, that means they have the sequence of the virus. Okay, so I don't quite understand the problem if they're saying that they don't have any evidence of the existence via the Koch postulates. The fact that they have isolated the genomic sequence, which is a messenger RNA, would prove that. So, yeah, send me more on that question, Loyalty. Okay? Perhaps December 14th when they have the needle and the eclipse. I guess that question is related to 5G. I guess, Jen? You may have said something earlier in the chat room. Oh, I see. Walking Dead. I don't know. A lot of people talking about December 14th and the eclipse. We'll have to see what happens. Is that a Tuesday, Thursday, or Sunday? I haven't even looked at it. December 14th. If we're doing a live stream on December 14th, I guess we'll find out. We'll cover it live. Okay, let's see. Do you have any opinion on the COVID self-testing kit now available or any understanding if it's harmful? No, it's not harmful. The testing that's going on is really for the purpose of collecting DNA samples. I do not believe it's possible. It's plausible. It's conceivable. But I'm not saying that they are. It is conceivable because they're inserting a swab, or you are inserting a swab into your nasopharyngeal area, into the back of the nose and back of the throat, above the epiglottis, it's conceivable that that swab may be contaminated with something that they want to introduce into the body. But I don't have evidence that that is taking place. I'm simply saying it's conceivable. But I do not believe the testing itself is harmful. I say that because if people began to exhibit harmful effects from the testing, then that would shut down their drive to get people tested. And the testing is simply a way of programming people into believing that science is benevolent. The testing is just programming people to go along with the whole program and to ramp up the fear and thereby the demand for the final solution. That's all the testing is doing, is getting people to the point where they want to demand the vaccine. And like I said in January 2013 in that video, you could not force people to take the vaccine. But by creating the problem, generating the reaction, they will demand the vaccine as the solution. Okay? So I don't think testing is harmful otherwise, unless they're extremely latent harmful effects. I don't believe the testing is harming anyone. Okay? Alrighty, let's see. I think I'll take one last question from the Twitch chat room, and then I need to give DLive chat room some love. Okay, so let's do that. I'm going to jump over there because I think I addressed most of the questions in Twitch. And let's see if I can get the DLive to open up. There we go. Okay, DLive guys in the chat room, this is your chance. Thank you for holding over so long. I think this is going to end up being the longest live stream we've done. Wonder what the second injection does to you. The second injection, I don't think we're ever going to get to the second injection. Okay, I don't think they need to do that. Just getting the first injection to the global population, which finally will be delivered by the microneedle array patch, will be it. Okay? Someone is saying in the chat room on DLive that the vaccine conference held in DC a few weeks ago that there will be 4 rounds of vaccines. Well, again, I don't think that they'll even get to that point. All right, I don't see any other questions in DLive. I think that they're probably done for the night. Let me go back to Twitch. I would like to say thank you for everyone staying so late this evening. Again, I think two great tools for witnessing. Project Rooftop, the PDF, free to anyone who emails me. I will send that to you. And then the December issue of Entangled Magazine will come out on December 1st. Okay? Thank you all. God bless you all. Thank you. And yes, the puppies will be part of each subsequent live stream. So we'll call them puppy streams, I guess, from now on. And you guys will share with us in their growth and development, hopefully their happiness, and hopefully I'll get a haircut here somewhere along the way. Anyway, thank you all. We thoroughly enjoy the fellowship with you, and we look forward to, Lord willing, getting back together with you on Tuesday evening. And then December 1st, Wednesday, the magazine comes out. Good night. God bless you all.